Would you destroy your own birthday just to protect your husband's jealousy? I would not, and that was why I told mine to leave. I had spent months watching Daniel change the energy of every room whenever Matteo, my oldest friend, walked into it. I was not choosing an ex over my husband. I was protecting 30 guests from one man's insecurity. Daniel only looked around the table, asked whether everyone had heard me clearly, and folded his place card into his pocket. Once he was gone, the party finally belonged to me again. My name is Simone Hart, I am 35, and I design luxury private events, so be serious. I know when one person is ruining the energy of a room. I was not cruel. Daniel had spent months turning every mention of Matteo, my oldest friend, into a problem that somehow belonged to me. I only wanted one evening where every guest felt comfortable. Daniel looked around the table, straightened the card in front of him, and asked whether everyone had heard me clearly. Once he left, I knew the party would return to the balance I had planned. People pretend loyalty should be enough for a woman. I watched my mother accept that idea for 24 years, right until my father replaced her with someone who still surprised him. She begged him to remember what they had built. He remembered. He left anyway. That was why I never trusted comfort. Before Daniel, I rarely stayed with a man longer than a year. A new man watched how I entered a room. After 6 months, most men stopped asking what I wanted next. They acted as if knowing my coffee order meant they knew me. Matteo had been different because he knew me before he had me. We were friends for years, though I always understood he wanted more. Eventually, I gave him a chance. For 10 months, he made everything feel spontaneous. Then his attention became guaranteed, and guaranteed attention is only another kind of furniture. Daniel appeared at a charity dinner soon after. He was quiet without being shy. He remembered that I hated lilies and sent white roses instead. He did not chase me across the room. That made me cross it myself. By the time Daniel asked about Matteo, I had reduced the relationship to one sentence. I told him Matteo and I had been close friends who tried dating and understood we were better apart. That was accurate enough. Details only create drama when people insist on collecting them. Daniel and I were good once. Every Sunday before sunrise, he drove me to a bakery across town. I chose the music, and he bought the almond pastry I claimed I did not want. When I started my event company, he stayed awake while I priced vendors and painted table numbers. He made a list and solved the next problem. That was also the problem. When I wanted excitement, Daniel offered a schedule. When I wanted him to say he still wanted me, he repaired something in the house. After my biggest promotion, he opened a spreadsheet and explained how the raise could improve our future. I had wanted champagne. He gave me percentages. For my 35th birthday, I decided the party would remind everyone who I was before marriage made my life so organized. 30 guests. Burnt orange cocktails. Candlelight against the walnut dining table Daniel inherited from his mother. I ordered embossed gold place cards because seating controls the room. Daniel found me arranging the guest list at the warehouse and softly asked what had changed between us. I told him nothing had changed except his habit of treating every friendship like a threat. He asked whether Matteo knew the party would happen in our home. I corrected him. It was my birthday in our home, and guest comfort mattered more than male competition. He went quiet. Then he straightened the sample card beside my hand and asked me to send the final guest list in writing. I laughed and asked whether he planned to inspect it like one of his risk reports. He said he only wanted the names exactly as I intended them. The next morning, I found the list printed inside a thin black folder on his desk. Of course he had printed it. Daniel believed paper made uncertainty behave. I placed Matteo 2 seats away from me and Daniel at my right side. It was balanced, mature, the kind of arrangement adults should manage without turning a party into a fight about old feelings. That afternoon, Matteo sent me a photograph for the memory wall. We were beside a lake, his hand on my waist, both of us laughing into the wind. It had been taken while we were dating, not during the friendship Daniel knew about. The picture made me look alive. I added it to the print order and decided the date did not matter. The print studio smelled like warm paper and fresh ink. Gold foil sheets hung from clips along the back wall, catching the light whenever someone opened the door. I arrived with Layla 10 minutes early because I wanted the place cards, menus, and memory wall photographs approved before Daniel had another chance to turn details into a discussion. Matteo arrived carrying a flat black box under one arm. He kissed my cheek, then placed the box on the cutting table as if he had brought something important. Inside were old photographs. Some came from college. Others were from road trips, late dinners, and summer weekends when Matteo was still my oldest friend. At least, that was how I described those years. Most people did not need a timeline of when friendship became dating. Labels only made memories look guilty. Layla lifted one photograph and laughed. Matteo and I were sitting on the hood of his old car, sharing a paper cup of coffee. It looked harmless. The next picture was not. We stood beside the lake, my back against his chest, his hand resting low on my waist. I remembered the weekend. We had been dating for 6 months. Daniel believed that photograph came from the years before Matteo and I tried being together. Layla asked whether Daniel had seen it. I told her he had seen hundreds of old pictures and would survive one more. Matteo said Daniel would probably study the shadows and calculate the exact month. I laughed because the comment was accurate. Daniel treated every emotional problem like a missing line in a report. Be serious. A photograph could not damage a strong marriage. I kept it in the print order. That was a choice. I knew it. But I also knew how the image would look on the memory wall. I looked younger in it, less careful. Matteo looked at me as if the rest of the lake had disappeared. Daniel had not looked at me that way in years. The gold place cards were arranged beside the photographs. I placed Daniel at my right side and Matteo 2 seats away beside Layla. Matteo studied the arrangement longer than necessary. He asked why my oldest friend had been placed like an ordinary guest. I reminded him that my husband would sit beside me. Matteo said he understood, but his smile became smaller. Then he added that Daniel had already taken enough of my attention without needing to control the table too. Layla told me the seating should reflect the people who actually knew how to keep the atmosphere alive. She said a confident husband would not care where an ex sat. I corrected her automatically. Matteo was my oldest friend. Matteo looked at me when I said it. He always did. I moved his card 1 seat closer. That evening, Daniel was standing in the dining room with the guest list open on the table. He had placed a ruler beside it to measure where the candles would go. That was Daniel. He could make even a birthday feel like a safety inspection. He asked whether I remembered the dinner at the wine bar 3 weeks earlier. I knew exactly which dinner he meant. Matteo had said Daniel was a safe choice and suggested I would become bored once the marriage stopped feeling new. Everyone had heard it. I had told Daniel that Matteo enjoyed provoking people and that ignoring him would ruin the joke. Now Daniel repeated the exact words. Slowly. He asked why Matteo only made those jokes about him. I said Matteo teased everyone. Daniel asked me to name one similar joke Matteo had made about Layla, Owen, or me. I could not. So I told him he was focusing on one sentence because he wanted a reason to dislike Matteo. Daniel straightened the ruler beside the guest list. He looked toward the doorway, where Layla had just entered carrying fabric samples, and asked whether she had heard what he said. Layla stopped. She told him she remembered the dinner. The room lost its balance at once. I asked Daniel why he was pulling my friend into a private disagreement. He said the disagreement had stopped being private when Matteo made the comment at a table full of people. I heard accusation. Daniel always claimed he wanted clarity, but clarity usually meant forcing everyone to stand in neat lines until one person looked guilty. I told him he was creating tension before the party had even begun. He went quiet. The next afternoon, Layla and I met for coffee after checking the flowers. She said Daniel seemed deeply hurt by Matteo calling him a temporary safe choice. I had never repeated those exact words to her. I asked when Daniel had spoken to her. Layla stirred her drink and said he had sent one message after the wine bar dinner. He had asked whether she remembered the sentence correctly. That was all. Of course it was not all. Daniel had started collecting sympathy because he could not control Matteo himself. He wanted people prepared to see him as the calm victim before my birthday even started. I told Layla not to encourage him. She agreed, but more slowly than usual. Later that day, Mara visited the studio to review the design for an upcoming client campaign. She stopped in front of the lake photograph. Her eyes moved from Matteo's hand to my face. She asked whether Daniel had approved the memory wall. I told her married women did not need permission to display their own past. Mara said nothing. She placed the photograph back exactly where she had found it and continued discussing the campaign budget. Before leaving, I ordered a second seating chart. On the first, Daniel sat beside me. On the second, Matteo did. I planned to decide which version the room deserved after I saw how my husband behaved. By 7 o'clock, the townhouse no longer looked like Daniel's home. Candlelight moved across the walnut table. Burnt orange peel floated in glass bowls near the cocktail station, filling the room with the exact scent I had chosen. Gold place cards waited beside folded napkins. Every guest had a position. Every light had an angle. That was what people paid me to understand. A good event did not happen by accident. You created the atmosphere, then protected it from anyone who tried to pull attention away from the center. That evening, the center was supposed to be me. Daniel had spent most of the afternoon helping the caterers. He fixed a loose wire beneath the drinks table, carried boxes upstairs, and showed Nina where his mother kept the serving trays. He never complained about the memory wall. He did not ask which seating plan I had chosen. I decided he had finally understood that Matteo's presence was not a threat unless Daniel made it one. Matteo arrived almost 40 minutes late with his camera hanging across his chest. He entered while several guests were already gathered near the stairs, which meant everyone turned toward him at once. He hugged me with both arms. The embrace lasted long enough for Daniel to see it from the dining room. Matteo stepped back and told me I looked like the woman he remembered from before marriage made everything so polished. I laughed and reminded him that he was talking to an event director at her own party. He said that was exactly his point. Daniel walked over and welcomed him calmly. Matteo thanked him for allowing the old group to use such a beautiful house. The wording was deliberate. The house became a venue. Daniel became the man who had opened it for us. I waited for Daniel to react. He only straightened the edge of a cocktail napkin and asked Matteo whether he needed somewhere safe for his camera equipment. Matteo smiled and said he always kept valuable things close. Be serious. Men could turn any sentence into a contest if they wanted. For the next hour, Matteo told stories from before Daniel knew me. He described a road trip where we slept in the car after getting lost. He talked about the night I climbed onto the roof of our apartment building because I wanted to watch a storm. Each story made the guests laugh, but he removed the part where we had been dating. Whenever Daniel asked a simple question about a date or place, Matteo answered vaguely. I helped him. Details would only damage the energy. Then Daniel reached the memory wall. He stopped in front of the lake photograph. The room was busy, but I could see the change in his shoulders. He studied Matteo's hand on my waist, then looked toward me. He asked when the picture had been taken. I told him it came from an old trip. Daniel asked whether Matteo and I had been together at the time. Matteo gave a quiet laugh and said labels had always mattered more to Daniel than they did to us. A few people smiled. Daniel did not. He asked me the same question again. I said the exact month was irrelevant because the relationship had ended years before I married him. Daniel turned slightly. Layla stood near the wall with her drink. Owen was beside her. Mara had moved close enough to hear us. Daniel asked whether they had heard the answer I gave him. Layla looked down at her glass. Owen's mouth tightened. Mara simply watched. I asked Daniel why he needed an audience for every insecurity. He said he was not asking anyone to judge. He only wanted the words remembered correctly. That was the problem with Daniel. He could make a birthday photograph feel like evidence in a workplace meeting. I told him he was embarrassing himself. He nodded once and moved away from the wall. I saw that as the end of it. At dinner, Daniel's gold place card sat at my right. Matteo was 2 chairs away beside Layla. For the first course, Matteo behaved. Then the cocktails reached the table, and he stood without being asked. He said he wanted to make a small toast. Matteo told the room that I had always been too alive for ordinary limits. He said some people gave a woman security, while others reminded her why life was worth enjoying. Several guests looked toward Daniel. Matteo continued. He said Daniel had given me a beautiful home, but my oldest friends had given me the personality worth bringing into it. The silence after that sentence was wrong. It made the whole table feel badly arranged. So I laughed. I said Daniel was excellent at building safe structures, while Matteo understood how to make life feel alive. This time, no one laughed with me. Daniel placed both hands beside his plate. He asked whether I truly believed what I had just said. I told him to be serious. It was a birthday toast, not a marriage trial. He straightened his gold place card until it matched the edge of the table. Then he looked at Layla, Owen, Mara, and the guests sitting closest to us. He asked whether everyone had heard me agree that Matteo gave me something my husband could not. No one answered. Daniel nodded as if silence had answered for them. He did not defend himself. He did not raise his voice. He did not even look at Matteo. His stillness made him seem beaten. That was how I read it. I reached beneath the sideboard and removed the second seating plan. Then I lifted Matteo's gold card and placed it in the empty chair directly beside me. Daniel's card remained on the table, just not where it had started. Mara asked Nina to take away her untouched champagne. Owen stopped speaking to Matteo. Layla laughed at the next joke several seconds after everyone else had gone quiet. The atmosphere was slipping, and Daniel was allowing it to happen. Near the cocktail station, Matteo told me he could leave if Daniel was going to spend the whole evening making him feel unwanted. He said it softly, but he watched my face while he said it. I understood what he needed. He wanted to know whether he still had a place in my life when keeping that place required me to choose it publicly. I told him he was not going anywhere. Then I looked across the room at my husband and decided Daniel was the one who would have to adjust. I found Daniel on the upstairs landing beneath the amber wall lamp. The music from downstairs reached us through the floor in dull waves. Owen stood beside him near the door to Daniel's mother's study, holding his phone but not looking at it. The party was still running below us, but the atmosphere had changed. Guests were speaking more quietly. Glasses touched the table without laughter following them. That was what happened when one person refused to release tension after everyone else was ready to move on. Owen asked me whether I understood how the toast had sounded. I told him to be serious. Matteo had made one joke. Daniel had turned it into a public investigation, and now my own brother was standing upstairs as if someone needed protection. Owen said the joke was not the problem. He said I had agreed with it. I reminded him that he had known Matteo for years. My oldest friend had been part of our family circle before Daniel ever appeared. Owen looked at Daniel, then told him he could stay at his apartment that night. That irritated me more than the accusation. I asked Owen why men always treated a woman's independence like an emergency. He said this had nothing to do with independence. It was about watching his sister place another man beside her after telling her husband he was not enough. Daniel straightened the small brass key tray on the table beneath the lamp. Then he asked Owen to give us a minute. Owen did not move immediately. That hesitation told me Daniel had already been talking to him. Of course he had. Daniel never raised his voice when he could create a quiet room full of people prepared to agree with him. When Owen finally walked downstairs, Daniel remained beside the study door. He asked whether I remembered the first dinner we had hosted in the townhouse. I remembered it. The walnut table had belonged to his mother. Daniel had cooked badly, so we ordered food from the bakery we visited every Sunday. I had burned orange peel over the candles because the room smelled too much like old wood. Daniel said he had chosen the same scent for my birthday because he believed I would remember that night. His voice became lower. He said he had spent weeks arranging the party around things that once belonged to both of us, while I had used the room to prove that another man understood me better. For once, Daniel was not listing dates or repeating exact sentences. His hand rested against the study door, and his eyes remained on the floor. The sadness was simple. I still heard pressure. My father had used sadness whenever my mother tried to demand an answer from him. He became quiet, looked wounded, and made her feel cruel for asking why he wanted someone else. I had promised myself no man would ever use disappointment to hold me in place. I told Daniel that guilt would not fix the evening. Then I offered what I considered a reasonable compromise. He could return downstairs if he apologized to Matteo for making him uncomfortable and agreed that my friendship would no longer be treated as a threat. Daniel looked up. He asked what Matteo had been required to give up in any of the compromises we had made. I said Matteo was not my husband. Daniel answered that this was exactly why Matteo should not receive more protection than the man who was. He began naming the pattern. When Matteo called him temporary, I described it as humor. When Matteo touched me too long, I described it as history. When Daniel asked for distance, I called it control. Every solution required Daniel to become quieter while Matteo became more comfortable. I told him he was arranging unrelated moments into a story because facts were the only language he knew. Daniel did not deny that. He said facts were easier to hold than feelings when every feeling he expressed was renamed jealousy. Behind him, the study door stood partly open. That was when I saw the overnight bag. It sat beside the desk Daniel's mother had used for household bills. The zipper was open. Inside were 2 shirts, his charger, medication, and the work laptop he never left unattended. The bag had not been packed during our argument. There had not been enough time. Owen had also known exactly where Daniel could sleep. For a few seconds, the landing no longer felt like part of my birthday. Daniel's calm did not look improvised. The bag did not look like a threat waiting for my reaction. It looked like a decision. Then footsteps sounded below us. Matteo appeared at the bottom of the stairs with his camera hanging against his chest. He said he could leave if Daniel was determined to make the evening uncomfortable. His eyes stayed on me, not Daniel. There it was again, a choice presented as courtesy. I told Matteo he was staying. Daniel looked at me without changing his expression. I closed the study door halfway, blocking the bag from view. Daniel had packed it because he wanted me to follow him. He expected me to panic, end my own party, and prove that his silence still controlled the room. I would not reward that kind of performance. Daniel walked downstairs beside Owen, not beside me. Mara moved away from the memory wall when I entered the dining room. Several guests checked their phones. Layla had placed her coat over one arm, though she set it down when she saw me watching. The party needed direction. That was my job. I crossed to the sound system and asked Nina to stop the music. Then I moved to the head of the walnut table, where every gold place card still waited beneath the candlelight. Private conversations had allowed Daniel to control the meaning of the night. I decided everyone would hear my version at once. The last note of music disappeared, leaving only the soft hum of the lights above the dining table. Conversations stopped one by one. Guests turned toward me because I was standing at the head of the room, where I belonged. Daniel remained near the doorway. Matteo stood beside the cocktail station with his camera against his chest. Owen was close to Daniel. Mara had taken a place near the windows. Layla stayed beside the bar, her coat folded over one arm. I told everyone that the evening had become uncomfortable because one person refused to respect the atmosphere I had created. Daniel looked around the room. Then he straightened the nearest gold place card. I explained that I had invited people from every part of my life. Marriage did not erase the years before it. A confident husband should have been able to share a room with my oldest friend without turning memories into accusations. Matteo lowered his eyes as if the attention embarrassed him. He said he could still leave. I told him no. The word came out more sharply than I intended, but the room needed certainty. If Matteo walked out, Daniel would believe his behavior had worked. Every future invitation would become another negotiation. Every photograph would require approval. Every friendship would have to pass through Daniel's private system of acceptable risk. I would not allow that. Daniel asked whether I understood what I was saying. I told him to be serious. I was asking him to stop punishing an entire room because he disliked one guest. He asked whether I was asking Matteo to leave. I said I was not. Daniel's attention moved to Matteo's gold card beside mine. Then he asked whether I was asking my husband to leave instead. Several guests shifted in their chairs. The candles continued burning between us. I said that if he could not behave respectfully, he should go somewhere else until he could. Daniel asked whether that meant leaving the house his mother had left him while my former boyfriend remained inside. I heard the word former and knew he had chosen it for the room. I reminded everyone that the townhouse was also my home. It was my birthday. Matteo had been part of my life before Daniel appeared, and I would not throw away years of friendship because my husband had decided to compete with the past. Owen asked me to stop. I told him this was not his marriage. He answered that it had stopped being private when I stopped the music and made 30 people part of it. Daniel did not look at Owen. His eyes remained on me. He asked whether I still believed Matteo gave me something Daniel could not. That question gave me the opening I needed. I told Daniel that for years he had answered every feeling I brought him with a schedule, a budget, or silence. When I wanted him to celebrate me, he planned for the future. When I wanted warmth, he fixed something in another room. Then he judged me for enjoying the attention of someone who could still look at me as if I were not another task on a list. Daniel could not dismiss that. His mouth tightened, but he nodded. He said he understood why I had felt alone. For a second, the room became too quiet. His agreement should have settled the argument. Instead, it made the night harder to control because he did not sound defensive. He sounded tired. I used his answer anyway. I told the guests that even Daniel admitted there had been a problem long before the party. He said understanding my loneliness did not make the way I treated him acceptable. Then he made one final request. He asked me to end the party, tell Matteo to leave, and spend 1 hour speaking with him privately. No audience, no cameras, no friends deciding who was right. The offer was almost insulting. Daniel had spent the evening turning people into witnesses, and now that the room no longer followed his version, he wanted privacy. I told him I would not destroy my own birthday to protect a man who only showed emotion when he was losing control. Daniel became quieter. That made me speak more clearly. I said Matteo was staying. Daniel looked around the table again. He straightened the place card in front of Owen, then returned his attention to me. He asked me to confirm one final thing so no one could misunderstand later. Did I want my husband outside while Matteo remained inside, sitting beside me? I looked at Matteo. He was watching me. That was the point. I had spent years proving I could not be trapped by familiarity. If I backed down now, both men would understand that marriage had made my choices smaller. I said yes. Then I walked to Daniel's seat. I lifted his gold place card from beside the plate and carried it to the doorway. Matteo's card was already waiting beside mine. Daniel held out his hand. I placed the card in his palm. He folded it once and slipped it into the inside pocket of his coat. He said he would handle everything properly from that point forward. No raised voice. No threat. Only that same calm that appeared whenever he had nothing left to say. I opened the front door. Daniel walked outside. Owen followed him onto the stone steps but returned a minute later. He did not look at me. I asked Nina to restart the music. The first song sounded too loud, so she lowered it. Guests remained standing instead of returning to their seats. I turned toward Layla, expecting her to help restore the energy. Her place beside the bar was empty. The coat was gone. Her half-finished cocktail remained on the counter. I sent her a message asking her to explain to the others that I had protected the party. She read it. No reply came. I moved Matteo's card into Daniel's place and poured him the champagne Daniel had left untouched. Then I posted a short video showing the candles, the gold table, and Matteo beside me. I added a caption about protecting peace from insecure people. The party was quieter, but that did not mean I had lost it. Daniel would spend the night at Owen's apartment. By morning, he would understand how far he had pushed me. He would return embarrassed, ready to apologize, and the atmosphere of our marriage would finally change on my terms. Matteo lifted Daniel's glass toward me. I smiled for the camera. My husband was gone. My oldest friend was beside me. The room was finally arranged exactly as I wanted. 40 minutes later, the front door opened again. The music continued for several seconds before the guests began turning toward the hallway. Daniel entered wearing the same coat. A thin cream envelope rested beneath one hand. I remained seated beside Matteo. Daniel walked to the walnut table and placed the envelope in front of me. Then he removed his folded gold place card from his coat, straightened it beside the envelope, and smiled. He asked whether I remembered why he always confirmed my words in front of other people. I reached for my champagne, but my fingers stayed around the stem without lifting it. Daniel said I had spent 2 years pulling friends into our arguments and giving each of them a different version. I had told Layla that he hated Matteo because he was insecure. I had told Owen that Daniel disliked every social event. I had told Mara that he tried to control my work. I had told Matteo that Daniel knew I would eventually replace him. Daniel had stopped arguing with those versions. Whenever I used another person to support my story, he sent that person the complete messages and asked only whether they remembered what had actually happened. Layla had known Matteo's exact wine bar insult because Daniel had shown her the full conversation. Owen had offered Daniel a room because he had already read the messages where I mocked Daniel for asking Matteo to respect our marriage. Mara had questioned the photograph because Daniel had shown her the original guest list and asked whether my professional event included images I had deliberately hidden from him. Every time Daniel asked whether someone had heard me clearly, he was not begging for support. He was making sure I could not change my words later. I said he had turned everyone against me. Owen answered that Daniel had never asked him to choose a side. He had only shown him the parts I removed. Mara said she had watched me stop my own party, order my husband from his house, and place my former boyfriend in his chair. I told her it had been a private marriage conflict. Nina stood beside the sound system and said it stopped being private when I asked 30 people to listen. No one defended me. Mara then explained that the birthday footage had uploaded automatically to the business drive. The cameras were mine. The consent forms were mine. The recording showed the entire confrontation. She said the family events campaign would be paused while her company reviewed whether I could still represent it. I turned toward Matteo. Daniel asked him whether he planned to keep the place I had given him. Matteo removed the napkin from his lap. He said he had attended as my friend and photographer, not as a replacement husband. Then he picked up his camera bag, returned Daniel's place card to him, and walked out. I looked toward the bar. Layla was still gone. Daniel pushed the cream envelope toward me and said the signed divorce petition would be filed the next morning, with temporary occupancy handled through our attorneys. 12 days later, I moved into a furnished apartment above a closed furniture store. I kept my income, but the townhouse and everything Daniel had quietly maintained stayed with him. Owen still answered my calls, though he no longer defended me to anyone. Matteo sent one message asking for distance until the divorce ended, then accepted work in another state. Mara removed my name from the family events campaign, and the birthday footage was never published. Daniel had been cold for years. He had answered pain with facts and offered plans when I wanted warmth. I still believed that created the empty space Matteo entered. But I had wanted 2 men in one room because one man choosing me no longer felt like enough. I thought controlling their places meant neither could leave me. One gold place card remained inside my handbag with my own name pressed into the paper. The only seat still reserved for me was the one no one wanted beside them.